Before we start this episode, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land from which we are recording. I am on the land of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people. Jenna is on Darug and Gundungurra land. We have Louise calling in from Yugambeh land, and Michael from Meanjin.
Welcome to Somebody You Love, or The Sale of Two Titties. I'm Jenna Love.
And I'm Holly Hart.
And we're experts in disappointing our parents, breaching community guidelines, and banging the people who vote against our rights. Here at Somebody You Love, we believe that virginity is a social construct, one that is rooted in heteronormativity, ableism, and misogyny, and can be incredibly damaging. But that being said, it is still a concept that is often incredibly important to individuals, and it holds meaning to many. It can have a significant impact on the way that people view themselves and are viewed by others. The idea of losing it holds cultural, social, and religious meaning, regardless of whether we believe that it should or not. Basically, it's not real, but also it is real. As sex workers, it's not unusual for us to see clients who have chosen to share their first sexual experience with us, and that can be a really big deal for them. And it's also really special for us to have been chosen to be a part of that. Today, we've invited two guests on the show to share their stories about losing their quote-unquote virginity to a sex worker. So first up, we have Michael. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here and for being willing to share your story. So I guess the first question is, what made you decide that you wanted to lose your V card, so to speak?
Well, I guess, really, as quite an introverted person, it wasn't something that I really thought about during my 20s or whatever. Just I wasn't going out trying to meet people for that kind of connection or being proactive for that purpose. Obviously you'd go out with your friends and that, but it was just something that I kind of assumed would happen at some point. I've never really felt any shame about, being a virgin. I think that it's just something that all my friends knew. And it's not as if it comes up in conversation all the time. It's and when it does, it's if someone finds that out, it's usually not particularly shocking. It's just oh, yep, that makes sense. That's fine. And then if there was a reaction, it's usually from dudes you don't know very well being oh, bro, very just, masculine about, you should definitely get that sorted of any way that you can. And it's I don't really have to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess as I was getting older, I was starting to get to the stage where it's oh, you're, 30. If that does now just kind of happen, it gets to the point where it's oh, I actually don't know any of the kind of unwritten rules or body language or signals and things like that. And then it's it's a much more different conversation of being hey, I've actually never kissed anyone before. So, and obviously the thought is that it's oh, well, if you have a partner that's compatible with you, then that won't be a problem. Yes. But then it's also that person is allowed to, prefer someone who has some experience and that's fine. And I guess the other thing that made me kind of think about it was during the pandemic, there was a lot of people talking about their own experience where even just missing physical contact for that period of time was really detrimental. And I was well, that's not something that I feel I'm personally dealing with, but is there a fundamental thing that I'm missing out on? And so I just wasn't sure if and so that was really, I guess, one of the impetuses to do that as well. So I guess those were all basically the reasons.
What were the factors that made you think that a sex worker was the best avenue to explore that?
Well, I think predominantly it was like I just felt like it was the easiest way to make it happen. Like, obviously, um, and like even the only way for me kind of at the time, it's like, I guess I have like a lot of anxiety around like sex and intimacy in like not really wanting to put a person into a situation where it's like I've made a assertion of and it's like and then they're uncomfortable and like
Right.
putting them in a position where they have to be like, oh no, like I no thanks, but then them feeling bad and then I feel bad because
Yep.
You didn't want all the awkwardness
yeah,
involved.
exactly. And so I guess like that's kind of the perfect way to go because it's like, this person, it's their job, like, like so long as like you're approaching them like, in a polite and respectful manner, like, like they're not going to be, to my mind, like taken aback by that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like
They're not going to say, whoa, you read the signs wrong. I don't want to fuck. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's not
yeah,
coming out of nowhere. It's pretty expected. Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
So I guess like the other thing for me is that like when making kind of that inquiry, like there's like so many resources on like how to do this, like what you should say and like how to and like all of this stuff of like, oh, okay, like now I understand like what's expected of me and I'm not making anyone uncomfortable. And so like that was kind of like an extra thing of like that makes me feel better about it.
Yeah, there's clarity around what's expected, which is so kind of lacking in a lot of more organic social situations, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And like I think that there's like these clearly defined boundaries,
Yes.
like that make it so helpful for me. And like obviously there's still a certain amount of awkwardness that just kind of happens in general life, but yeah, like that's definitely what I find really good about it.
was this towards the end of the pandemic? Is this when you first decided, all right, I'm going to take this leap?
So it's a bit different because obviously depending on where you are, there were definitely different things happening in the country. Like for us, like we were not like in lockdown for a long amount of time. So yeah, like for me this was like
Mid-pandemic?
early to mid
Ooh.
2021.
Okay.
So like mid, yeah.
And you thought, I've heard about this loneliness pandemic and I've heard about people craving intimacy and connection, and you thought this is probably the time for me to explore that and see how I connect with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and the other thing is like, as someone who was like a student for quite a long time, like, I mean, it was also a financial, like, being able to afford that kind of thing. So yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, and I might be reading into something that isn't there. But so you mentioned something about talking about, putting yourself in a situation, an intimate setting with somebody, and then that person maybe being uncomfortable or something. I've heard a lot of similar things from a lot of my clients who are men that I've spoken to, where there is particularly for men, and particularly I think for younger men and for men who are, aware of social justice issues, aware of the Me Too movement, etc., which is excellent, like very sexy, very attractive. But I think for a lot of those men, there is this great fear of putting a woman in a situation that she doesn't want to be in, of being
One of those guys.
of perpetrating harm without intending to at all. And is that something that sort of was weighing on you?
I think definitely like that is 100% a part of it. I think also like it's hard to like not say this, like say this and not sound like a bit like I always like one of the things that kind of always happens is like in terms of like empathy. Like, I mean, like, even from an early age, like, you know, I'd be watching like a James Bond movie, and like, you know, all these, you know, henchmen would get killed, and I'm like, what happens if, you know, like, you know, then they will never go home to their family, of like, you know, I guess just like putting myself into that.
Yeah.
And so like, I like, a constant thing for me is just like, you know, how are my actions going to impact the person that is going to receive those actions, I guess.
Which is, you know, an incredibly sexy quality. Makes you really qualified to be an intimate partner, I think.
Yes,
you know.
yes.
But it can also really get in your way, because I think we all have to acknowledge that we do inflict harm on one another, because we do. Human beings hurt one another, intentionally or otherwise. So that can be really hard to reconcile.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So you did it. Was the experience what you had hoped for?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. It was great.
Nice.
Like, you know, I was able to email her, and just like, you know, just was very upfront and being like, this is my situation, and like, this is what I was looking for. And like, they were, you know, really receptive to that, and like really lovely about it. And like, I mean, I had kind of like looked for a person where it seemed like that would be the case, of like, that would be something that they would be fine about. So like, you know, obviously at the time that happened, like, I was, you know, I was a general level of kind of nervous about, like, not to the point where I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, like, but just more so just like, just a general level of, you know, doing a new thing. But yeah, like the book, it was like the booking was very communicative, and like, just to make sure everything, like, I was fine with everything that was going on, and like, and you know, it was a really, really great time.
That's so nice.
I think like one of the biggest things for me was like, you know, obviously we kind of like live in a world where, you know, there's like media, like movies, TV, and like, even like at uni I did a human sexuality course, and so it's just like, so like logically I'm like very understanding of like, yes, this is how sex works, and it's like, but it's also just like, I've like previous to that, like, always felt like a bit of an outsider to it, of like, oh yes, like, I understand that happens to other people, doesn't happen to me, but that's okay, like, you know. And so like, then now it's like, oh no, it can be something that I also participate in. So like, that was also like really good.
Yeah.
And I guess like the other thing about it was like, I also was like very honest with myself beforehand, of like, you know, for my expectations of like what it would be like, and like, these are the types of feelings that might come up. And like, I think honestly, like, the fact that I did wait until I was in my, you know, early 30s to do that, it was like, okay, like, there is more perspective to that, of like, this is what it is, this is what it's not, and like, you can separate the, you know, this was a great experience, to like, these are the feelings that I have about that. And so like, I was like very glad that I had kind of like reconciled that within myself beforehand.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm not one to ever, you know, I never think that virginity is some, you know, thing that should be held on to, and that you should be waiting for the perfect magical moment or anything like that, obviously. But it does, you know, it sounds like there is something to be said for, you know, doing things when you are emotionally ready for them. And that's sounds like exactly the experience that you had.
Definitely. I think a lot of people could achieve, I think a lot of people would have more satisfying first experiences, perhaps, if they did wait until they were ready in certain capacities. And I'm not advocating everyone wait and hold on to your virginity, but I definitely think that a bit of growth in certain areas would make the experience better for a lot of people. But can I just clarify, when you say that you saw things in media and then you thought that you were one of the people who do that now as well, or you can experience those sorts of things, is what you're saying that you felt more like you were connected to society, or that you felt, having done that experience, that you could relate more to what other people had, their experiences?
I guess it's like if I had to give an example of like, oh, if you like look on Instagram or whatever, and it's like you see this person and they go off and they travel all over the world, and you're like, oh, that's great. Like I know that people do that, but like I'm not like that's not something that I've have the time or the resources to do, and so you don't really you just don't have that kind of frame of reference for. I guess it would be similar if you'd never been on a trip, and then it's like, oh yes, I understand people go on trips, but like, and so yeah, I guess like after doing that, I'm like now like, oh yes, okay, so I understand like what to extend the metaphor, I understand what going on a trip now means, like, so now I can more closely relate to those TV shows, movies, etc.
So before this booking that you had, had you had intimate experiences with other people? So like making out and stuff like that?
No, I hadn't.
Yeah, right. So had you not kissed someone?
No, wow. That was the first time for everything.
Wow. Did how good kissing is blow your mind?
Oh, 100%.
It blew my mind.
That was like the biggest takeaway for me.
Right? Yes.
And I felt like, for want of a better word, I felt like a teenager of just like, oh yes, like I understand why teenagers just want to make out all the time. Like,
because I remember before I'd kissed, and I didn't kiss anyone until I was 18, which I guess can be on the later end of some people's experience. And I remember always being like, I can't imagine kissing's that good. Like I would kiss my hand with my lips and I'd be like, it doesn't feel, and then I will never forget when I first kissed someone and I was like, oh my God, like this is way better than the movies make it out to be. Like it's amazing. Yeah, cool. Cute.
Pretty magical.
So did you end up seeing that sex worker again? And or have you seen other sex workers since that experience?
So to answer both questions, it is yes. So I have. So the sex worker that I saw ended up moving, like not that long after that happened, which was like, yeah, look, great for them. But, and so like now basically, we get to meet up infrequently when, the stars align. But, I've been lucky enough to have like several different experiences with different workers over the last three or so years. All of them amazing. It's hard to kind of like, obviously, I'm still very awkward. But
the thing is, we all are, babe.
We're all just faking it.
I mean,
you'll learn that it never gets better.
You just get better at faking it, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I mean, like a worker I'm seeing at the moment is just like really. Been helping with my self-confidence and being like, you're allowed to take up space within like this area. Like, so, and like, that's really, I'm like really grateful for that. And like, if it feels nice to kind of, be able to take part in that. So yeah, no, all of it been great.
It is. And I think so many people would be surprised about, like, I'm sure Holly's done the same. And I've done a lot of work like that with a lot of my clients who don't feel they can take up that space and who don't feel comfortable to express themselves sexually, and who do feel, particularly with the male clients, that worry that just their existence is imposing on mine as a woman, and just them being with me, they feel as though they're doing harm just by being a man who wants to be intimate with me, I just don't think people realize there's so many expectations that the clients of sex workers are just men who come, who use us, who just want to have an orgasm and leave. And it just so often is almost the opposite of that. Like I have to convince so many of my clients that this is about them having a nice time and that it's important that they get things out of this and that they enjoy it, whether they orgasm or not, that they enjoy it sexually and that they feel nice. It's quite, it's quite a common experience for a lot of us, and people just don't, it's just not the way it's framed. And it's not the way relationships between men and women, to be really heteronormative about it, it's not the way that they're framed.
And I think like it's hard because it's like obviously it's important for like that kind of like those negative experiences are like, no, this is not like the way that happened. But then like sometimes it feels as though those experiences are like the ones that are talked about, and then sometimes like positive experiences aren't, because it's like, well, what are you going to say? We had a nice time, it was good, like, so
I think we have that problem in this show all the time, because we say we love our clients, we have great clients, but what else are we're not going to go into detaels about their lives, and we're not like,
can't come on here and say, I had 100 bookings this year that were really lovely. The first booking was really nice and just a nice guy and a wonderful time. The second booking of the year was so nice, and oh my God, what a lovely person. The third booking, like people are they don't want to, it's not that they don't want to hear that, but what we're here to talk about is more interesting. We want to create and share things that are
100%.
Educational and interesting. So like you said, society and media tends to gravitate towards speaking about things that are not always the nice things. And
and there are so many beautiful stories.
So many.
Like just like yours.
Yeah. Have you had any sexual experiences since this awakening outside of bookings? And if not, do you feel a little bit more confident in yourself now, or in possibly approaching that in the future?
So I have not had any like personal experiences. I think like mostly for the same reasons of like, I still feel that way about, like not wanting to make people feel uncomfortable. Like, I think that, I think personally, like there's a lot of like personal development that I need to do for me, like mentally and physically, to be like that I would feel comfortable to do that. I mean, obviously, as like kind of a societal thing of like, men are always the one to be, the one to make the first move, for lack of a better word. Like, that is obviously a roadblock to that. But like, I mean, I guess like, as I said, like, I just feel like I need to do some work on me, and like that's fine. But absolutely, I feel like definitely more confident about like that if it was to come up organically, like I'm like not going to be like, oh, I've never done this before, what am I doing?
Run out the front door.
So yes, definitely.
And I mean, again, it's a whole other topic, but I've got a real issue with the expectation that in a hetero environment that men are expected to make the first move when men are also the biggest perpetrators of violence. Like, to me, those two things don't go well together. And it means that the only men that are comfortable making the first move are those that are unaware of that power imbalance. Yeah. And that then the men who are aware of it, the kind of men who listen to our podcast, the kind of men
that you want to make the first move,
that you want to, that are really, eligible bachelors and the kind of people that would be really suitable for a relationship, would never make a first move, because they understand, and that's why every man I've ever dated, I've made the first move, because that's the kind of man I'm attracted to. So, I think also, any man that made a move on me would not be my type.
You're just
unfortunately.
You're just a little hornbag as well.
I'm a little hornbag.
You are.
Yeah. Well, I know what I want.
Yes, so, you do. You do.
Yeah.
We love that.
But yeah, I really, I'm the last person that would be out here being like, life's really hard for men. But I think in the dating kind of scene, it's not easy. And I don't envy you.
Well, what are you going to do, You're
going to see a sex worker. That's what you're going to do. And look.
Exactly.
True.
Absolutely. So, Michael, have you told any of your friends or family that you did this?
So for a long time, like I didn't. It was like, like I didn't tell any of like my friends that I was no longer a virgin, because then like that would be a conversation of like, oh, can I see a picture of the person? Like, what? Tell me all about it. Like, and I'm just like, and like I don't think anyone would have been like judgmental.
But that doesn't necessarily mean you want to have those conversations.
No, exactly. And it's like, obviously you have a conversation with someone and then they have a conversation with someone, and then it's just the whole thing. So it's like, and so I mean, to be quite honest, like that was difficult, I get, like not difficult, but just like there were times when I was just like, oh, I just had like this really amazing experience that I can't talk about with anyone. And like, and like, the only person that I could talk to about it is like, I don't want to bother them about that, because like, like I don't want to just be annoying, this sex worker that, I just had a really great time with. So, but recently, one of my friends who, has been in a lot of relationships has like, mentioned to a group of our friends that they were thinking about seeing a sex worker, and like I ended up having like a conversation with them at a different time to be, it just like led to a really great conversation, like about, because like a person I've known for many years, and like they were like, oh, that they weren't really sure of my sexuality, because like I'd never been in a relationship during our friendship, and like they wanted to be supportive, but like also not like push a boundary that like and so like I think that like it was very like definitely I'm glad that we had that discussion, and that it's not as if I'm keeping them up to date on all of but just like it's good that I did did feel better to talk about that in that environment. In terms of family, like I don't see that being a thing. Just
some things family don't need to know about.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's it, right? Like anything like this, it is your private life, and you obviously don't have to tell anyone. You don't owe it to anyone. But at the same time, I think, if you do have somebody that you can share some little part of these things with, it can be really, it's really nice to share it. Like I've got a number of clients who, see me, and like kind of like you touched on, like I'm the only person that knows about it, and they can't kind of chat with me about it outside of our bookings because they're not paying for my time. It's a bit of a shame, because sometimes you want to share cool shit or tell a funny story about something stupid that happened in, so if you can share it, then that's really nice. So I'm glad that I'm glad you had the conversation too.
I was listening to one of the earlier episodes with I can't think of her name, but a woman client that was on the show, talking
Maria.
about like and she was like talking about how she just was like 100% just like went to a friend straight away and was like, this is what I'm like, that's great, like
she was awesome,
that's amazing.
Yeah, and not everyone has that kind of relationship with their friends too,
I'm glad you were able to connect with a friend, and both of you sort of destigmatized that situation as, your friend being a potential client and you being able to say, hey, I've done it, it's not a big deal, and this is my experience, and then that person be able to talk with you. Like that gives you both, it's not that you have to call each other each week and recount every sexual experience and thought and person you see, but it's nice to connect.
Yeah.
I've had another question that's popped into my mind while we've been talking, which is that I feel like at least once a week, I think listeners of this podcast will clearly know that I spend too much time on Reddit because I reference it so often. But I reckon at least once a week, somebody posts being like, hey, I'm thinking of losing my virginity to an escort, to a sex worker, etc., to a P word. And, the comments are always mixed, but I think, but there's often a lot of comments saying like, don't do it, you'll regret it. Obviously a lot of stupid stigma comments that are like, don't, you'll get a disease and whatever other crap they want to say. But I guess my question to you is, if somebody said to you, hey, I'm thinking I'd like to lose my virginity and I would like to do it with an escort, what would you say to them?
I would be I would say yes, definitely, that's a great. But I think that there is also a larger conversation to have of like, I do think it is really important that like there is such a societal imposed emotional weight to that I think that there are definitely people who that would be a lot for, and like that it could make it so that they it's hard to process those feelings of like, and now I'm and I can see a world where a person would be like, do that and then have a good time, but then like in a reflection be like, oh, I'm not sure that I should have done that, like, and feel shame for that, and like, not that I think anyone should,
no
but like, I think that there is like just I guess especially if a person is younger, I would be, because like I know for myself, like, would I have been emotionally equipped enough to deal with it? Maybe not. But but then there could be people who would. So that's a long rambling way of saying it depends, but I would be fully supportive.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant answer.
So maybe combine it with a little bit of therapy as well. Maybe make sure you're taking care of your mental health in other ways as well.
As always.
Yeah, yes.
And there is, I've heard men who are 21, or women, I've heard people of all genders at, 21, 22, go, oh my God, I'm a virgin. I'm going to be a virgin for the rest of my life. I'm like, oh my God, you're a child. Like,
plenty of time.
But sometimes there can be that rush and urgency for, as we said, something that's socially constructed and really actually doesn't mean anything anyway.
And maybe you never do it, and that doesn't really matter. It's not, you don't have to do it.
Absolutely. But then it can have meaning for a lot of people. So, it's depends on the person.
Yes.
Exactly. And that's not to say that if a person has like, lost their virginity to someone who means a lot to them and that holds respect, like, that's great. I like that's your experience. But yeah, it is what you make it, I think.
Actually, is there anything you want to add? Anything that you just want to make sure is said or people hear?
Yeah, I guess like the biggest thing for me was like, I'm just like a person who does a ton of research about like every single thing of like, I'm going to a new I'm going to a new place to eat for lunch. Like, is it table service or do I go up to like all that kind of like really stuff that doesn't matter, like you can kind of work out, but like, and I think like it's really important to like when you are looking into stuff like that of like, how do I act? Like, what should the resources that you use are ones that are done by sex workers, because like obviously doing a bunch of research, there are parts of the internet that are not curated by and it's like you see those and then you're like, this feels a lot like when you are like, just very not a good time. So I guess like that obviously it's hard, like I've not found a good way to formulate it into words, but ultimately the sex worker is the person that you're going to see, and they're going to be the one who's able to tell you like what the best practice is to make sure everyone has a great time.
Bloody perfect.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Honestly, I don't know if your answers could have been any better today. Michael, it's been such a pleasure to chat to you, and you have been so forthcoming, and your way of explaining things has been really fantastic. I know a lot of my clients that I see regularly that would have been way too shy to come on the show will relate to so much of what you said, and same with Jenna's clients. It's been really, really helpful. Like I said, for people to relate to, but also for people who haven't had that experience to hear the journey that you've gone through, and for sex workers to hear the impact that we have. I think we're aware of it in some ways, but even just you articulating that is really, really special. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. You did fantastic. I know it's really nerve-wracking coming on the show. It's nearly as nerve-wracking as losing your virginity, I can imagine. So we're really grateful. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Michael.
Thank you.
Next up, we are hearing from Louise. So hello, Louise. Thank you for being here.
Hi. Nice to be here.
So let's dive straight in. Great way to get to know people. What made you want to lose your virginity, and what were the factors that made you decide that seeing a sex worker was the way to go about it?
I'd been curious about sex for a long time and wanted to have it. It wasn't happening for me. Wasn't sure why until kind of a couple of years before COVID, when the autism lights started hitting and I started to realize that's why I couldn't just go to a bar and hook up with someone. And I think it was kind of during COVID I started to be like, yeah, this is really what's happening for me. And that I started just like hear from disabled people that like it's okay to struggle in certain areas or need some help. And that's when I started to feel like give myself permission to maybe explore seeing a sex worker a bit more, because I thought about it before, but I'd had that kind of stigma before of like, oh, what kind of person sees a sex worker? Like, can't I really just go to a bar or just find another way?
The other ways sound awful. Going to a bar and picking someone up sounds atrocious.
I'm really glad in hindsight that I didn't do that. It probably would have been terrible.
Do you feel like you had tried when you had met other people in different circumstances to form those sorts of relationships and they had failed, or that you just had not really approached it at all, that you'd sort of gone, nope, this is too daunting and I'm not even going to, you wanted it, but did you think you tried in any way or not?
Yeah, I think I tried. I think I tried more with people who I felt comfortable and there was more of a friendship with. But I remember how having a friend take me to a gay bar on a Wednesday night, and I was just really overwhelming, and I was like, I can't be here. And none of the people who I was attracted to, it just never was mutual.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Which is, I think, what's the word? People that are neurotypical have that same experience, right?
Yeah.
But as you know, it's only going to be sort of more amplified, or there's going to be more barriers for you when you have different types of neurodivergences.
Yeah. And, I knew there was something different about how my sexuality worked as well. I was not attracted to people the same way that I saw other people being attracted. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I just never saw someone and was like, oh, sexual attraction. It always took a while. So I was trying to figure out what was happening there, and that made it hard as well.
Yeah, definitely. So how do you identify?
I now identify as demisexual.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, which was something that this whole process of seeing a sex worker helped me figure out.
Absolutely.
What was going on there.
Was the experience what you'd been hoping for?
I think my hopes and my expectations were two different things. Mm-hmm. Of course, I hoped that it would have been really amazing, but I expected that it might be kind of awkward, and that's pretty much how it was. Uh-huh. I kind of walked out feeling like it was, initially I wasn't sure.
Oh, wow.
I kind of felt like I left with more questions than I had answers. But with a bit of time, I was like, I think there were bits that were nice, and I kind of, in hindsight, feel like it was a neutral experience, because while it was initially just kind of awkward, it led to me having a better understanding of what I needed to communicate, or even just letting someone know that I might have trouble communicating and what I was looking for. And then it ended up leading to an experience that was probably one of the best of my life. So
go and tell us about that. No, yeah.
You don't have to go into detail, whatever you want.
But kind of after that experience, I was like, I think I just need a really long time to feel comfortable. I just need to really dedicate some time and effort into this. I went through basically all of the profiles of the sex workers on the East Coast to try and find someone who I was based off of their profile, the information they have online, that I thought would be the right person. Ended up finding a really wonderful worker. I had an overnight. It was the best time of my life. I've seen them regularly since for the 2 years, and it's just been the best thing ever.
Oh, that is brilliant. That's so nice. And okay, let me know if I shouldn't ask this question, but on that overnight, were the two of you sexual?
Yes.
In that you were, yeah. So it wasn't necessarily that you felt you needed heaps of meeting, but you just needed this time and space.
The
to
time
be able
to not have pressure and
yeah.
And somebody that you felt like you were really aligned with, that you worked out was right for you.
Yeah, that's so cool. And so do you think now maybe the first person you went with, as you said, it did lead to positive, but maybe wasn't the right person for you?
Yeah, I was just kind of going for someone who seemed like professional the right time, like had a website, seemed like they had a lot of experience kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah, which is I mean, I think, gosh, it's so hard to pick in this industry, right? Like, it's so hard. And there's so many people out there.
There are a lot of fantastic individuals.
Absolutely. So do you think, have your thoughts on like virginity and sex and sexuality? I mean, I guess you spoke about discovering how you identify sexually. Has all of that changed over time? Has seeing sex workers had an impact on that?
I mean, I don't think my anything about virginity has changed. I already was just like gay enough that I was aware that it was a construct. Just kind of came up. I don't know. I feel like sex just kind of seemed like this mysterious thing before that everyone seemed to be having, that seemed like a big deal. It doesn't seem like as much of a big deal now. It's also become just kind of a bit of a special interest, though, something that I love learning more about. So.
I love that. Yeah. Do you think since finding your sexual identity that you feel a sense of community, either more identified or more aligned with the queer community or with the demisexual community? And has that been something that has enriched your life, do you think? Or is it more just that you've really enjoyed going down the rabbit hole of the sexual discovery itself?
Yeah, I think it's more that I've just enjoyed going down the sexual discovery rabbit hole, all of the podcast, all of the books. Like, it's very...
What a great rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
Love that.
Well, we know that you have had sexual experiences since that booking. Have you had any sexual experiences outside of a booking setting?
Not yet.
Is that something that you are interested in pursuing?
I'd be interested in pursuing with the right person. Whether that ever happens for me, I don't know. That's okay if it doesn't. If it does, great. But,
Yeah, sounds like the perfect approach, to be honest.
Have you told any friends or family about your experience?
Yeah, I have a family member who's a sex worker, so when she kind of came out, I was like, oh, I have a story for you too. And it's been great to be able to just share with her and her partner about my experiences and be able to have someone to tell about that.
Oh, wow. And that, I imagine, would have been kind of a relief for her because it's... it's always a bit scary coming out of it. Whatever it is you're coming out of, it's a bit scary.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really nice. Cool. And it's great that you have someone to confide in.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to say, I had a comment on virginity that I feel like should have come in one of those questions and didn't get, or with my experience with it, that didn't get commented, which is that I feel like I didn't lose my virginity until the second booking.
Right.
Okay. I like
Are you able to speak more about that? Like the way it felt or the...
It felt like, because the first booking felt more like I was just kind of there letting someone do something to me. Yeah. The second booking felt like more of a collaborative effort. There was more communication and comfort. And even though the pleasure was mostly about me, it's we're collaborating to get there.
Yeah, that's really nice. I love that. It was you were, really actively
involved. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is what you want. But yeah, nice. So if somebody told you that they were thinking of booking a sex worker with the purpose of losing their virginity, or that it would, be their first sexual experience, what do you think you might say to them?
Yeah, definitely. I think particularly if you're nervous or having trouble, otherwise, a good idea, it's professional. That's what, it's one of the things that, they can help with. Just do your research, know what you're looking for out of it, and make sure you share that with whoever you book.
Yeah.
May I ask how you found, let's say for your second experience, what avenues you went down to find the right person for you, or what were you looking for in terms of compatibility? You don't have to go into like specific things, but was there some green flags that you would see from a provider that you felt was right?
Yeah, I mean, I looked for someone the second time who had like a lot of like social media, website, blogs, so I could just kind of get a feel and kind of like get to know them, air quotes.
Yeah.
Before I met them, so that there was something to emotionally connect with. I was looking for someone who I felt like would have a proper understanding of neurodivergence, which I now know is a lot of sex workers, but I didn't at the time.
Yes.
So I remember that she had the word executive dysfunction in one of her blogs. I was like, her.
Yeah. Yeah, and even though there are plenty of sex workers who are neurodivergent, that doesn't necessarily mean they're very well equipped to, to support someone else through their journey when that other person is neurodivergent. It can, but I think it's complex. And sometimes we have competing needs when based on our own, especially with sensory stuff, and that can actually be.
That's true.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking, in regards to your demisexuality, what have you found that your needs are when it comes to spending time with a provider? Was it building that rapport in the lead up to the booking, or taking it slow during the booking, or building a little bit of a connection first, or what makes you feel comfortable as somebody who identifies as demisexual?
And it is kind of a combination of all of those things. Mm-hmm. And I'm also aware, like, that I'm not going to be sexually attracted to every provider that I, might see. So I have that expectation. Like, I kind of think I just got lucky with the second provider that I saw, that it did just kind of build, and the right stuff was there to build a sexual attraction. But, like, I have a new provider who I've been seeing for a couple of months, and, like, as long as I'm like comfortable and trusting and there's enough connection there, we can at least like do the stuff that's on my side. Yeah, and that can like touch can still feel nice. It's just, whether it develops into, me wanting to reciprocate kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I mean, there is non-sexual touch.
Yeah.
There's other types of intimate touch and just, I don't know what you call it. Yeah. Just intimate touch, I guess, that isn't sexual necessarily.
Yeah. Like, a lot of the bookings so far with the new provider I've been seeing have mostly just been like cuddling and a massage.
Yeah, beautiful.
Do you find from the get-go that you are reasonably comfortable with that, or even from that first booking, do you find like that non-sexual or non-sensual touch that you're like, okay, we gotta get through this, and is it quite daunting?
Yeah, with like the first couple of bookings can feel like that, where I feel like okay.
Okay, yeah.
And like the first one, I try to not really make pressure to have that, when I was like, oh, you can just make social bookings cool,
Yeah, absolutely. Can I ask, was it scary for you taking your clothes off or in front of someone?
Definitely the first few times was like really intimidating. And then there was the whole, wait, now my clothes are off, where do I put them? Like kind of thing. I think I've gotten pretty comfy with it now.
Oh,
I feel like I'm the worst provider for that, because my workroom, there's not much space around the bed, and so and I feel constantly like I have clients just holding a pile of clothes looking at me panicked, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I've put hooks on the walls, I've put a basket in the bathroom, I've tried to give them options, but I do feel I feel bad. I feel like I stress. I see that stress in their eyes. And I'm also like, chuck on the floor, whatever, it's fine. But maybe they don't want to do that.
I'm just normally like, what did you do? I'll just do that.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, we love copying some social cues. We're like, you're doing that thing, that must be normal, I think.
Absolutely. I guess
I don't trust my own judgment. Yeah.
Although I feel like nothing that we do, like sex work is... okay, I'm not going to say sex work isn't normal, because that will get me widely cancelled. But it's a bizarre situation for everyone.
Yeah.
Meeting someone for the first time and just being like, oh, we're in an intimate setting so quickly, like it's unusual for most people. So I think that also, if you're feeling like, I don't know what the norms here are, that's because the whole thing isn't super norm, I think.
In social settings that you have been in, whether that's been attempting to date, I don't know whether you've used the apps or whatever your circumstances are historically, where you've met people that you may look at dating or hooking up with. Have you felt like attraction in those situations? Have you gone, do you know what? I think I might want to be naked with this person after a while? Or are you sort of like, nah, we've got to like have like a 5-year plan. We've got to work towards this, you know? Or what's your levels of desire there?
I mean, not that I've ended up a lot of like actual like trying to date experience, but never felt like sexual attraction to anyone who I've, you know, talked to on a dating app or met. I can count on like probably one hand the amount of people I've felt sexual attraction to in my life.
Yep. I'm going to ask a really like uneducated question, which is, if you don't experience much sexual attraction to people and in your lifetime you haven't, how do you know that you're gay or straight or...
And I mean, I haven't experienced much sexual attraction. I have experienced physical attraction where I look at someone and be like, oh, she's cute, and it's you know, 9 times out of 10 always been a female. And like,
it's just that you don't necessarily feel the desire to jump her bones.
Exactly.
But
like
you like the way
like you might, and I mean, again, that's not a common thing for me to be like, oh, she's cute. It's like an occasional thing, but like I hear other people and they're at a party and they like, look at someone and they're like, oh, yum. You know, never in my life has that something I've experienced.
Yeah, interesting.
I think that's a great question, Jenna. I think
Okay.
that was really good. Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic.
Thank you so much for coming onto the show, Louise, and being, you know, sharing your story with us, which is, it's a pretty vulnerable kind of place to be. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise.
See ya.
No problems. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode, and a huge thank you to both of our guests for sharing their stories and being really vulnerable with us. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Please look out for us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. Our name everywhere is Somebody You Pod, as in podcast. Our Patreon starts at just $3 a month, and you can get all of our episodes ad-free and a day early, plus bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes action, bloopers, and more. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the voices of sex workers. And remember, somebody you love might just be a sex worker.